Good morning, everybody. It's morning for me by an hour. Um, my name is Master Raven Mayne. I reside in the Kingdom of Aidenvelt. I have been teaching this class for over almost 2 decades now. I've been. This is when I started. It started when I was doing scrolls for my kingdom. We went. I was in a great transition in our kingdom. We went from printouts that you would get on a computer where they would be colored in with marker or colored pencil to within maybe 4 or 5 years, our kingdom started using parchmentine or simulated vellum. So I was really in a I guess you would call it a golden age, I guess, in my kingdom, where I was able to learn what we used to do and what we ended up starting to do. So what ended up being my thing, I guess, was shading. So when I painted scrolls, I did them, I did every kind of technique, and I found out that a watercolor technique is what I like to do, and it seemed to work for me. I use this class specifically for those who want to see, who usually paint scrolls and they don't like it because it takes too long. They want to see something, see their progress a little bit faster. So I use a lot of these shading techniques to illuminate like an entire scroll, and so that you can actually see what colors that you're using, and then you can add more white or darken more areas. So I'm going to be teaching 4 shading techniques. You can use them all, in my opinion, you can use them all on a scroll for different reasons. Because what my main purpose or my main thought is to get something completed. So whatever, I'm not usually stuck in a technique to only using one thing, the entire scroll, no matter what it is. I'll use whatever technique, whatever paintbrush, whatever colors I need to get the outcome that I want for a scroll. So I'll be teaching lifting, layering, blending, and what's been called a reverse color wash. The one recent add that I did to this class is, which I thought I could just do a Google search and find the technique so that I didn't have to write it. So if any of you have ever had to write a manual or write a class or instructional, you know how difficult it is. So I thought I would just go find it on the internet and just get a better description of how to do feathering, but I couldn't. So I added it as much as I could in my handout, which if you didn't get, we will add it. If it's not, it's in the chat, but we'll make sure that I add it again. So it's actually hard to find something that says feathering on the internet. So that's one of the first techniques that I'm going to show you tonight. It's not a shading technique necessarily. It's just a method that we're going to be using a lot in each one of these different shading techniques. So let me switch to my other camera someday. See what I'm doing. There we go. So I put just a little bit of green down. If you don't know about gouache or watercolors, you really don't need a lot. A little bit goes a long way. Unfortunately, that means sometimes your paint goes bad before you finish the tube. Not often, but sometimes. The brushes I use normally are what I believe are I used to call chisel. I think they call angle brushes. The reason you can use any brush that you want, but I use this one. The reason is because, like a calligraphy pen, it has it's multi-purpose. So I can either do a broad stroke with a long end. I could do a really skinny line if I wanted to, or I could just, what I do a lot is I will just take paint off on the very tip of it, and just grab just a little bit of paint just on the very tip, and put that onto my artwork. So that's what I kind of do. Another thing that I'll say a lot is get the consistency of your paint to be like melted ice cream. So sometimes you don't want it as thick right out of the tube. It is, but you want to put it a little bit of water just to get just so that you can move it around a little bit easier. So my shading technique is this. Well, feathering, sorry. So basically what you're doing is you're going to get some paint out, right? And you're going to clean off your brush every single time. You're going to clean it off before you put it back in the water to clean it off. So you don't want to put more paint in the water. You have to. You want to get a damp brush. So not so that it's dripping, so that you're dripping all the place, but just so that it's wet. And then what you're going to do, which is more of a watercolor technique too, is that you're going to put wet water. You're going to put water down where you want it to go, and then you're going to do these round circles like this. So what you're doing is you're putting down a lot of paint right here on the very top, and then what you're doing is you are getting your paintbrush wet, and then you're just pulling this paint down to here, and then when you clean off your brush again, you're going to be pulling the paint that you laid down. So what happens when you do this, which this is not a great example, but you can kind of see where it kind of goes from dark to light. So again, you're going to be putting like a thick line of paint down wherever you want it, usually on the dark side of whatever you're painting. And then you're bringing it down to a certain point. And then you're going back with your paintbrush, clean, wet, damp paintbrush, and then you're just going to be pulling from this line that you laid down, and so forth and so on. So then you're going to clean your brush off, and then you're going to do it again. So that way you're just doing a gradual gradation from dark to light, but you're doing it in sections. And you can always go back to the beginning and do it all over again if the shading is not as dark or as pronounced as you'd like. So I pick usually two different colors. Don't mind the dirty palette. I usually for this class, I usually pick two colors. Now, the reason I do this is just for example reasons. Not necessarily that you would definitely, you would use this in an actual illuminated scroll, but just so you can see it in these examples that are more pronounced, so that you can actually tell what you're doing. So in this first example, for today, I picked yellow and green. That's kind of my go-to to pick a lighter color, or lighter shade of color, and a darker color. It could be any two, preferably not white, but almost any other color that you consider that are either contrasting or complementary will both work. But before we start this one, what you need to do is you need to take a paper towel or a napkin or whatever you have. So and you're going to take it and you're going to fold it as much as you can comfortably. So it's roughly either a small rectangle or a square. And have that at the ready. And then you're going to take, and what you're going to do is you're going to, for this first example, you're going to paint the entire oval one color. So whatever, usually your darker color. So I'm going to paint this one green. In my handout, or in my class, I have this prepared for everybody. This is all, unfortunately, I used a lot of watercolor paper. That's not great, unfortunately, but it was too late. So I'm trying to use them as I am teaching this class. But I did a little sun in the corner to show that that's where the light is coming from. It's usually in Mayne manuscripts, usually comes from the top left corner, just so that your eye automatically goes there on every page. when you're reading a book. Um, so the light source always has to come from one direction. So no matter how you paint a scroll, make sure that everything that you paint is always from that direction. If you don't, it'll look odd even to the eye, and you won't know why. So this first one is lifting. So what we're going to do is we're going to just paint this entire circle. I may have added too much water for that. One color. Pretty thick paint if you want. Melted ice cream. The only thing that I haven't figured out for this class too much, and I've been, every time I teach it, I've gotten suggestions, but I still haven't found a really good suggestion for drying time. Because usually when you're doing this on an illuminated scroll, you have to control, you have to have water control, because you don't want to lay down too much water on any scroll, or any, for, whether you're using vellum or parchmentine or anything, you really don't want to use a lot of water, because it will buckle. So you really have to be careful with how much water. So most of the time, what you would do is you would paint a part of a section of a scroll, and what you should do is leave it, move on to the next section if you can. And the reason for that is so that it gives it time to dry. But in this class, with the time allowed, I don't have a lot of time to let things dry. I've tried fans. In class, when I teach this, what I usually do is I have them pick it up and carefully, hopefully, when it's somewhat dry and not too wet, is to pick it up and use it as a fan, or just wave it in the air to get it to dry as fast as you can. So some of these techniques that I'm showing you today, you might have to try again on your own, but give it plenty enough time to dry before you, a little slower than I will be doing today. So this is roughly, if you don't know, Eden Belt is just Arizona, and we have a humidity problem where we don't have any. So our humidity level is usually 0 most of the time. So things dry really fast. I'm talking now just so to let this dry a little bit, but I find it funny sometimes, because I will take classes, or I will listen to someone who says, I have to give it enough drying time. And I usually tell them that I could probably just walk outside and walk back in and it'll be fine, or just set it outside and it'll be dry in a couple seconds. And that's some of the stuff that I used to do, and I used to paint or needed to dry or whatever. I would literally just set it outside for a couple minutes or whatever, and it would be dry really fast. So whether it's glue or staining wood or whatever it is. So with a clean brush, you're going to take a damp brush, and what you're going to do is you're just going to take, and you're going to put water down. Hopefully this works. You're going to put water down just on the section that the light is coming from. And no matter what you do, make sure that you are making where the light is coming from has to follow the shape of the item, no matter what it is. So for an oval, which I picked for this, is just that you're going to wet it in a semicircle pattern just to cover this top part. And then what you're going to do is you're going to take your towel and you're going to go straight down, soak up some of that water, and then straight back up. It's pretty simple. But again, if you do it, if you do it too much in one section, you're going to pull up a lot of pulp from the paper, or, from whatever, you're using. So, or making a buckle. So you'd have to go and do a little bit, and then you'd have to come back and do a little bit more. You want to try and blur the edges a little bit. And then you're going to take your piece of paper that you fold it up, and you're going to use a clean side because you don't want to put paint down. You just want to pull it up. So then you're going to go straight down, press it a little bit, and then right back up. It's pretty easy. It's not a great example, but this is another way of taking paint off. Usually, normally, the normal procedure when you're doing a scroll usually is that if you use and you painted something and you want to take paint off, you're going to scrape it off. This is another way of doing it. If you just want to lighten it up, you don't want to take all the paint off. You just want to, do a little bit. So, and then you can just work at it. So like this is one of my other ones that I did. So you can kind of see, you have to work at it a bit. Again, letting it dry between each time you work on it, so it doesn't wrinkle wrinkle the paper, or that it pulls up any of the pulp if you're working on watercolor paper or Bristol board, or whatever it is. So you want to work at these slowly. So unfortunately, for this aspect of it, you want to, well, a lot of these ones, you're going to need to take your time, but you'll be able to, like I said, see the outcome a lot faster of what color that you're going to paint it. So if you wanted to make this lighter, you could add white if you wanted to, or you can add, a darker color or black to the dark side, the dark part of it to make it more extreme, but you don't really have to for a lot of the scrolls. So the next one is layering. Now, layering is done a lot. The reason being is that there are quite a few paints that are opaque, which means they're when you put them down, you can see right through them, and it doesn't cover an area very well. So a lot of period pigments are made that way because depending on the mineral or the vegetable that you use for the paint, each paint that you make has a different consistency on how strong it is to fill an area with a certain color. So this one is used a lot, not just in shading, but just in general painting. What this will do, if done correctly, is when you do layering with these kind of things, and you actually for this specific reason that I'm about to tell you, is for depth. So they will actually pick opaque paints for that reason. Because as you're doing layering, it'll give an item whenever you're painting more depth. So it without actually making it, three-dimensional or whatever it is. So what you're going to do for layering is that you're going to paint the entire circle again, like you did the last one, but not with heavy paint. What you're going to do is paint it, which I call tint. So what you're going to do is you're going to have more water than paint. You have to just do a little bit, move your paint over a little bit. Water. You just want what I used to call dirty water. So whatever description you need. So you're going to paint the entire circle a tint of whatever color. So I'm going to do green. So it's just going to be a tint of green. I can only think of an example that we have out here. I'm pretty sure it's in more places, but out here, if you go to any kind of gift store, tourist store, I guess, or just an Arizona appreciation store, you will see sometimes a thing where they put glass, and they'll make it like in the shape of a cactus, and they'll take pieces of glass, from large down to small, or if you take any kind of glass and do that, you'll notice that if you look outside through a window, it looks very clear. But if you've ever placed a lot of pieces of glass together, the more you put together, the more that you'll see that glass is actually a green or a blue tint. And you won't notice that until you put a bunch of them together. So this is kind of that aspect of it. So you're going to paint the whole thing a tint of color. So it's going to have a light tint. This could have been lighter, but I'm paint this all one tint of green. So let's see if I can do this without killing the paper. So what you're going to do is you're going to do this. You're going to paint another tint of color after it dries, miracle-wise. But you're not going to paint the whole thing. What you're going to do is you're just going to paint 3/4 of it. So you're going to leave this top quarter alone, and you're just going to tint this color. If you want to put your finger down, you can. You barely see that. Let me try and make this more pronounced. I think it worked. I think that's better. Looks different in person than it does on camera, so I'm trying to work with my camera. So there's a lot of different ways that they use this technique, but I've been to the Getty, I've been across the pond, as they say. And I've seen a lot of scrolls, and most of them you can't get close enough to tell. But from those that I've talked to, that actually have gotten close up, it does look like they use just this technique alone on the entire scroll. I know I've seen at least quite a few limited manuscripts from parts of France, probably 12th, 13th century. A lot of them use this technique, and in my opinion, that I could see through glass at a museum. That's what the technique kind of looked like. So when this dries, what you're going to do, I might have to I'm going to be using probably more paint than I should, just so that you can kind of see what I'm doing, see the technique better. Now when you do this, you're only going to paint half. So now you're only going to paint this half, roughly half. So you left this quarter alone. You painted this quarter here, and now you're painting half. So you can kind of see how it's going. Like I said, when you do this, what I did when I use this technique a lot is that I would tint all of the colors. I would pick all the colors for everything that I wanted to paint on a scroll, and I would just go through them and lightly tint everything the colors that I wanted. And that way I got to look at a scroll from an artist's point of view and kind of look at it and see if I needed to change any of the colors. This is usually at a scriptorium, so those not like normally. Suggestion would be to make a copy of your of a blank scroll with just like line drawn of a scroll, and then color in with pencil was usually the suggestion to see if you liked it or not. But you don't always have those options when you're at a scriptorium. So the last part of this technique is that you're just going to paint this last quarter. That kind of worked out, sort of. And you probably wouldn't use that much paint. But this is just because I don't want to kill the paper as much as possible. So what you're going to do after you've done this kind of technique, you're going to let the whole thing dry. Make sure it's completely dry before you go back and do this. And what you're going to do is you're going to take your damp brush, and then you're going to, what you're going to do, because you can see the lines. So what you're going to do is you're going to take the damp brush and you're just going to do little feathering techniques, and you're just going to blend these two. You can blend the lines out. So because a lot of the gouaches will let you reconstitute it enough so that you can see the shading, you know, making things better. There you go. It's kind of a better one. But it depends. Well, roughly that's where it's supposed to go. It has to look better. That's a better example. That's a very extreme example, but so that's how you do that one. That's just layering, and it's one of the easier ones to do. And like I said, it's more of a period technique on how they painted scrolls and periods. So the two main concerns on any of these techniques or anything painting when you're painting scrolls is your control of water and making sure that things are dry. Because sometimes people want, I have seen a few people in a hurry and they'll want to get a scroll done, and when they're done, the scroll is very warped and crinkly, so you got to be careful. So the next technique is blending. Now, I haven't seen this technique a whole lot. I think that I just added this one in because it was one of the techniques that was shown to me, and this is one of the main reasons why I have you pick a light and a dark color for this. So what you're going to do, I usually use two brushes for this class, so you can do that too, only because it's easier to change colors or to use multicolors when you're painting. So for this one, you're going to paint the top left of this little egg, lighter color, whatever lighter color that you chose. And you're going to put more heavy, more straight out of the tube consistency than the last one. And you're just going to paint the top left corner with paint. So get this reconstituted. I'm also working with crappy paints. Since I teach this class quite a bit, I just bought whatever paint was at, you know, the local craft store. So I forgot which one this is. Oh, it's Reeves. So there's a lot of different brands. And another casualty of COVID thing that we were going through is that a lot of companies went out of business or had to change their name. Paint companies, which I didn't think was going to be a thing until the plant that I needed to paint, the production plant that I needed my specific color paint at, which I don't blend my own colors if I can help it. The whole plant closed because of COVID. So I was out of a particular color a little while and I was not great at mixing my own. So now you're going to take the dark color and you're going to line the bottom right corner with that thick paint. Whatever color you chose. You want to lay it down thick, so as thick as you can, which is really why I like painting with gouache. I have painted with period pigments. I painted with almost every brand out there. I do like Winsor Newton. It seems to get when you've been painting with Reeves for years, and then you go, you up your game a little bit. And you start painting with the better paint. You can tell the difference. The only reason I don't like period pigments personally is, and I don't I wouldn't say for me, it's not a good thing. I can't seem to grind it down. A lot of the minerals and the fibrous plant material to get, so I can get the colors, but I can't seem to get it into um, a way to use it the way I like to do it. So a lot of times my paint ends up being grainy, but again, that's a, user problem, not necessarily a paint problem. But I have used it. I have used period pigments on actual goat skin. I have used it on, on calf skin. The only thing I like is on when you're actually using skin, you don't get a lot of buckling because it's skin. So, but you still have to be cautious on how you use it. So hopefully these are as dry as I can get it for this class. And I'm going to use a damp brush, and like we showed you before with this feathering technique. So that's what you're going to kind of do. So you're going to go on this top. It's not completely dry, but you're just going to wet down where you want your paint to go, because it'll go, your paint will go least resistance. So it should stop when it gets to, where you painted it. So you're just going to bring it down a little bit. Hopefully I brought enough paint down. And like I said, you let it dry. So let's go. So you're going to be pulling it towards the center. And there are two theories on this. You can either bring these two colors together and make a new color in the center very lightly, or you can leave it white or untouched by paint. Okay. So your damp brush, I'm going to go, and you're just like I said with this before, just pulling down from what you already pulled down. So you're going to put water down where you want it to go, and you're just going to pull what you already pulled down from the first one. And little circles to get it down. So sometimes it's a good day, sometimes it's a bad day. But you kind of see where it kind of goes from a darker yellow to a lighter yellow. If it didn't work, which we'll see what happens to the green, I'll have to, if I can give you an example with the green, but like I mentioned before, if it's not making that a nice gradiated look from dark to light, you can also clean your brush off, let it dry, and you can go back and do it again. So put water down here, pull this paint down to this section, clean your brush off, let it dry, and then you just pull from where you pulled down before. You just keep doing it like in steps. So the other thing that I do a lot is that I only say this because I've seen people not do it. And what they'll do is they'll not move their scroll when they're painting it. They'll leave it right where it is, and then they'll try and maneuver their body around to paint it. Well, your wrist naturally wants to move in an arc, so you don't want to try and do maneuvers that your hand isn't naturally doing it. You let the natural movement of your hand do it rather than you trying to do it. So what I do with things like this is that I'll just turn it around or maneuver my scroll so that I can better illuminate a scroll. So like I said, using the natural motion of my wrist and my hand rather than trying to fight it. So I'm going to do exactly what I did with the light side, the yellow side. I'm going to do it with my green side. So see how this goes. With a damp brush, I'm just going to put a fine line of water. You've dried too fast. So I'm going to try and reconstitute this one, and I'm going to pull some paint down, little tiny circles. I'll be pulling it towards the center. much as I can. You're going to be pulling that paint, so you want as much of, you don't want all of it, but you want enough of it so that you have something to work with when you get down to the next section. So however much paint you can do. And again, letting it dry, which I am not able to. But then you would go and you let it dry, and with a clean, damp brush, you would go again. Whoa. You go again, and you would just put water down where you want the paint to go, and then you would just pull from that section. As you can see, I did either my paper is soaking up all my water or not. So, like I said before, if it's not working out as what you want, what you can do is just clean brush, and you can lay more paint down. You can do this process all over again. It's not doing what you want it to do. Remember to clean off your brush before you clean it off. I usually have a piece of paper in my hand, my left hand. You're not seeing on the computer, but I usually have it in my left hand. So that way I can clean off my brush every single time. Some people leave it next to their water or off to the side to clean it off before they put it in the water, but I find it easier for me to do it with my hand. So now let's see if I added too much paint. So try and pull this down a little bit. Probably ruined it. Now if you put too much down, you lift it off. Now, like I said, this technique is not used a whole lot, and it's used a lot better than I'm doing it. Most of the time, they'll just do a little bit of the light color on one end and a lot of dark color on the other end, and pull it all the way up. But for this example, when I use it for this class, I bring everything to the middle. So normally you wouldn't be bringing it to the middle. You'd be bringing it more to one side or the other to make either your bright side brighter or your dark side darker. But I bring it towards the middle for this one. So, and my green is not going to be happy. But normally, if you let it dry, you can do it, and then you'll get so. Yeah, see, I over soaked my paper, so moving too fast. But just that gives you a rough idea of what this technique is. Let's see if I can find. Here's a good example. A better example, I should say. There you go. That's a better example. And like I said, normally when you're painting this stuff, you're going to bring this all the way closer to this section and have this, or this side is going to be a lot lighter. Depending on whether you want more light on on whatever you're painting, or more dark, depending on where it's located on your scroll, or how you want to make it look. So it'll all be up to your eye, but basically that's what you want to do. So, and again, sometimes they make it and they blend the two colors together, or they'll leave this white, or they'll add white inside this little section to do that. So, and if you over soak it, you can see that. Probably can't see that. I really over soaked it, so I really soaked up that section in there. It's not too bad. This last technique is something that I use a lot. I used to use a lot. And the reason I did is because what I would do is I would, sometimes when I'm at scriptorium, which is for here, it's usually, for me and my baron, it was every Tuesday night. So I did that for years. Sometimes I would want to do a scroll because, high production, you want to try and get scrolls done. So what I would do is I would I'm going to turn this upside down so that I get my hand out. What I would do is I would pick the colors. This green is probably not going to be helping me today. So what I would do is I would look at a scroll, and I would, before I left Scriptorium, I would take one of the scrolls that I had drawn up, not painted yet, and I would go along and I would just put a pretty thick amount of paint everywhere, in the bottom right, in the bottom corner, on everything. And then I'll let it dry before I left Scriptorium. Put it in my folder. And then I would take it to work the next day. And on my lunch break, to get ahead of the game, what I would do, especially if I had to finish it that day, I would obviously let it all dry. And this last technique is similar to a lot of what I just showed you, so it's not going to be a major deal. But I'll show you some of the ones that I finished and if practiced enough, you'll be able to see it. But in most of my classes, I'll have at least one person that'll be like, "That was super easy." So it doesn't happen every time. So basically, similar to how I did this one. I'm just going to put water down. Probably too much water. What I'm going to do is I'm going to pull that paint, all circles. Try and get this radiation as much as I can. Try and pull that down. Might be too dry today. Sounds like everybody's gonna have warm summer. In Arizona right now, it's already 90 degrees. So if this worked properly on a normal day, I'd be letting it dry. And then I would go back and I would put the water down. And I would pull a little bit more down from what I already pulled down. Of course, today, let me pull a little bit of my tint, maybe it'll help me show you what it's supposed to look like. So basically, on a normal time, you'd be letting this dry, so paper's not being very helpful today. So basically, you would be pulling this paint again, like you do in steps, and you're going to be doing in one section until you get all the way to section. So a lot of people that I show use this a lot once they've mastered it, once they get a better technique, because you can see darker light right away. So like I said, at the beginning of the class, you can add more white, you can add darker colors, but basically it's super fast. So once you learn this technique and you do it super fast, do it better you can. So let me show you a better example of that. That's that there. So if you do it better technique, you can see where it goes from dark to light, and you can do it really quickly. And like I showed you, if you put too much paint down, you can use your lefty technique. If in certain areas, if it's not the color that you want, you can use the layering technique. If you're trying to add darker black or a lighter color, you can use the blending technique to try and get your colors to show more drastic, or you can just use one color, which is the last one. And most of the classes, like I said, that I teach, the last technique that they do, and they look at it and they're like, I'm going to use that one. It's the faster gratification is a lot of what I get when someone says they don't want to do scrolls. So I try and figure out ways to show them these different techniques, so that way they have something in their technique tool chest, toolbox, scribal blocks, if you want to say, just so they have stuff to do so that it can, and try different brushes, try different paints, try different styles, whatever you can do to get the look that you want, do it. There are teachers out there that will say, that will promote, don't use any other paint, don't use, any kind of brush. And that's not the way I teach things. Use whatever, however you want to do it. If you're not, especially if competition is different than regular scriptorium painting, whatever you're doing. So if you want, so when you're trying to make scrolls and you're mass production for wherever you're at, do whatever you can. If you have to do a competition, it's a whole nother thing where you have to try and figure out this best way to do it. But try two things that I say for many people who, no matter what art they choose, is don't fight your materials. So if you have horrible brushes, maybe you might want to try and think about getting better brushes. If you don't like the paper that you're painting on and your local area will let you use different kind of paper, use different kind of paper. If the paint that you're using don't be frustrated at yourself when you're doing scrolls. Try making sure it's not one of the tools or items that you're using that's giving you the problem. And then work on what techniques that you want to do. So, and one last thing, also, like I said, and I said this entire time, is make sure that it dries. Make sure that you're doing a technique and you're coming back to it, no matter what it is. Don't try and overdo any kind of section because it will not, the paper or something will not be very forgiving. So you can do that. So that is my class. I'm not sure on how long I took. Usually it's longer. Yeah, it's not too bad. But if you have any questions, I can try and answer them if you would like to ask, if there's any questions in the chat that I didn't see. Oh, and I believe on my handout, I haven't looked at it in a couple of days, but I should have my email on there somewhere, I think. But it's Raven Mayne. If you can look for it on Facebook or Google. But if you have any questions about anything that I do, or if I don't know, I will definitely send you to someone who knows so that you can always do it. But always be happy, be a happy scribe. Be happy what you're doing and make sure that whatever art, especially when you're doing scrolls, is that you're doing it because it makes you happy. So and that's it for the class though.
All right. Any questions from anybody?
Thank you, Master, for your time and your expertise.
Happy scribing.
Thank you.
Welcome. Yeah, I was can mention this, probably doesn't need to be recorded, but someone was saying that you always say, have a nice day. And you're like, well, have a better day. No. So she came up with some phrases that the only one I can remember is find and eat great snacks.
And it's lunchtime for the Outlands. So they'll start doing the afternoon sessions at 1 p.m. Mountain Time. Go hydrate, go fuel up, come back for other classes, and have a good day.